Well, good Tuesday morning, everybody. Hope you guys are off to a good start. Anybody got something they just can't wait to share with this group? What's going on this Tuesday morning? Margaretta.
Morning.
Morning.
Yes, I
What do you
have a
got?
pressing issue right
All
off the
right. That's
press.
what we love. That's why we do this.
Yeah, I actually I have two little things, but what the first one I want to talk about is when there's like a bank on property that sometimes you see that they put a restriction that 7 days only, technically like first time home buyers or like owner occupants can put an offer in, and then they have a language there that says after that 30 days other investors primarily can do this. And this is a home that's a multifamily that needs like a complete redo, got all that. So I guess
Yeah,
I'm
let's
not,
just
like
let's
if we can
just
dive into that, what does that mean exactly? Because I kind of know, but I really don't know.
No, I think it's exactly like it says. They're trying to promote home ownership on these foreclosure properties. And you won't see this necessarily all the time, but I feel like there are certain vendors that handle these foreclosed properties and have to turn around and sell them that have this. I don't know if anybody kind of knows off the top of their head. Or Margaretta, what's the website that you're dealing with right now that has this?
It's actually on MLS. It's on the market property, and it's like I'm working with this buyer, and she's interested in buying it, but she's really an investor using hard cash.
Yep.
So I know when I've dealt with this, you have to do an affidavit that you will be living there for 1 year because that's one of the requirements. I mean, I don't think her flip will take a year, and she's really not going to ultimately live there. So I guess I'm just not sure how to go about this. So, and the question I have really is it after 7 days we can submit her offer as an investor, or we have
Yeah.
to wait the 30 days? I'm confused about that myself.
So when I've seen this, and Lauren, I see your hand. I'll get to you next. When I've seen it, it was very clear. We have a 7 day period, 14-day period, whatever, 30-day period. It's homeowners only, right? So you have to be living in the property. This has to be your primary residence. You can't own any other property, or maybe you could own some other investment that was clearly an investment property, but this has to be for a primary residence, and that's it. They're looking at offers for 7 days, let's say, and if one comes in and they like the number and it's an owner occupant, then that deal goes through. Once the 7 days is up, now it's open to both owner occupants and investors. And it could be 10 days, 14 days, 30 days, whatever the case might be. So you've just got to look at the strict, the fine print to figure out which, uh, timeline they're going by for this particular property. Lauren, I'll let you go.
You had asked a question about websites, and from my experience, it's usually, at least in our area, prop offers, the one that has the date restrictions on it, whereas like HUD Home Store is more just straightforward. And a lot of times on the website, when you go there to register to look at the property, so you might want to look in the disclosures, Margaretta, on where you are submitting offers for this property. There's usually like a questionnaire you're filling out as part of putting in the offer that asks a lot of questions, your intentions of the property, things like that.
Yeah. So
Yeah, now
for
that you
whatever
mention that, it makes sense. Yeah.
for whatever reason, some of these people are just looking to promote home ownership, and others are just looking to get rid of the property. Right? Because the reality is, I mean, there's a lot of, especially private equity now, getting into purchasing properties. And so this just gives an opportunity for the average homeowner to just buy before these investors come along and scoop up these properties. But yeah, most likely, Margaret, if it's listed on the MLS, it's the disclosures or there's going to be some sort of an attachment that's going to say, hey, you're actually going to submit your offer over here. When you go to that website is going to tell you, hey, here is the period, here's who can buy. I think it might even be, it's not always just homeowners. There might be other categories, Lauren. I don't know if you know off the top of your head, but they'll put other people besides first-time buyers or homeowners in the first grouping. Maybe charities or something end up in the nonprofits. Anybody?
I've seen nonprofit it's listed,
Yep.
but usually it's owner occupants is the first one. But then it's really funny how they never go back usually and correct it, because you'll see these are on for like 100 days, something like that, and it'll still have that listed on there. That first 30 days or whatever is only owner occupants, things like that. So just pay
Right.
attention to days on market and the website that you're dealing with.
Any other
Yeah, this is
questions?
definitely a hard offers, prop offers. I mean, so I just didn't look on the actual prop offers website. I need to go in there and probably look at more of the documents that's needed. But thank you so much. That's a good one. I should know this.
That's okay. That's okay. Anybody else have any questions or come across something similar that would just be a good share here? Have you seen another website and how they do it? Lauren?
I guess I just want to talk to the fact that a lot of times you're not going to have much of any communication, regardless of who the agent is listed on these. I know we had touched upon it once before, right? But usually you'll see an agent's name associated with it. You'll try to get in contact with them, questions answered, things like that. And oftentimes communication with that agent listed that has like the REO on this property is not very communicative.
Yeah. Yeah, there's usually not too much. If you do get them, they're gonna be like, just go to the website and read the read the instructions is what they're going to respond with. Anybody else come across something similar around buying periods or something you saw on one of these foreclosure websites to just chat about? All right. Well, that was a good one, Margaretta. Just don't rely on, and I see you, Lauren, don't rely on the MLS, guys. You've got to go and figure out where am I actually going to be submitting the offer and then go read the fine details there.
My last thing was also check disclosures. Sometimes there's like limits around of what the deposits have to be. Sometimes it's like 1% or X dollars, right? Minimum of whatever. And then sometimes there's like a fee due by the realtor, things like that. So again, just reading what's associated with that one in particular.
Yep. There's also sometimes a non-refundable deposit on these. So that deposit goes in, it's $500 to write the offer. Whether you end up buying the house or not, that $500 is gone. I've even seen some that it's like $250 just to make the offer. So just read your fine print, make sure your buyer understands what their obligations are going to be. Margaretta, I thought you said you had a second thing, or did we cover both?
No, I actually have a second thing. I'm curious what people might think on this call. So on a different set of regular property, more of a high end, let's just put it, I'm having a hard time with my buyers. They're like very, what's the good word for this? They're above anything. You know, like one thing after another, and we're being very accommodating, almost like I'm setting up my sellers. I'm like, let's just make it happen. What are we going to fight over 5K? It's not worth it at this point, at this price point. But now I just came back and they're like, oh, we need 2 week extension on closing. And my people need this closed ASAP. We already stretched this out pretty far. And it's like, and it's about their vacation schedule that she forgot about that she has a vacation. I'm like, well, move after vacation, before vacation, you got options. Like, but I feel like this person is so emotional about this. Like, it's almost like I could say, well, let's charge them per day for each day they want extended, I guess. But is it even worth it? I mean, I just don't want to lose this deal because we can't. My seller's got to sell.
Yeah, negotiations always come down to leverage, and the buyer has the leverage, right? And so, my personal opinion, based on where you're at right now, is there's just no leverage for you to go. And I don't even know that legally you're going to be able to do anything, right? There's been a lot of precedent here about reasonable extensions, and if you've extended, one time for already a week, and they want another 2 weeks, we're talking about 3 weeks. I mean, in the you know whole scheme of things, 3 weeks on a real estate transaction isn't a lot of time, you know? Now, if you've got a seller up front that really has to be out by a certain deadline, right? Then when we structure the deal up front, then we can put per diem charges. And sometimes you'll see these, the bank foreclosures do this, right? So you've got a date, hey, and we put time is of the essence into the contract, right? We are scheduled for June 30th. For every day after June 30th that you close, the buyer will incur this charge. Okay. Now, if a
Well, the
seller
funny
really
thing
needs,
is,
if a seller really
the
needs to
funny,
move on for some other reason and they just need to, they need the money to get to the, $100 per day charge doesn't really do them any good. We're talking about $3,000 over the course of the month. That's great. It covered their mortgage for the month, maybe, but it didn't get them to the next property. So, but I've
well,
seen
they're
stuff like that.
smart enough. They're smart enough. They don't want to sign the purchase and sales. So, like their deposit was, they don't care about their deposit. That's how rich they are. They just don't care, and they just want what they want.
Now,
And I'm like,
those are some concerning words. What do you mean they haven't signed the purchase and sale, though?
so they've been, because they actually give themselves so much time about purchase and sales, inspection period. It was like really stretched out in the offer, and we're like, okay, let's just be accommodating. And now they're saying before they even signed the purchase and sales, which is due like today, and she's throwing an addendum at me that like she wants 2 weeks extension or they're not signing purchase and sales. So we only have the offer as our contract so far.
So look, an offer, unless there was specific language in there that said this is, not a binding offer, and even that to me has been, difficult to interpret, and I don't know how the courts would really interpret. If you've signed an offer, you've kind of signed an offer, right? And so if you've got a binding offer, I'm not as concerned about that purchase and sale. But at the same time, you kind of don't have any leverage here, right? We've got a high-end property. We don't have 9 backup offers. This is the buyer that we've got on the table. And it's kind of hard to give pushback on 2 extra weeks when we don't, what's our other option? We can come back to market and take 2 weeks just to potentially even find another buyer that's now going to take 60 days to close. So, right, you got to look at your options and go, hey, yeah, this isn't ideal, but it's probably still our best option.
And that's how I feel. It sucks.
Yep.
I'm just sharing. It sucks.
Yeah. I mean, this is why, and you can't always do this, but this is why we want to explain to our sellers that we want to price aggressively, because we want multiple parties involved. Because when we have multiple parties involved, we've got leverage. When we go for aspirational pricing, we shoot up high, we drop, we drop, we drop, we drop. Finally, we get a buyer, but now we're at the mercy of whatever that buyer wants because we've only got one buyer. Right? We're stuck with that lender that they have. We're stuck with that agent that they have. We're stuck with the type of loan that they're getting. So that's great. We got an offer, but we got no leverage on it. And so these are the, it's almost like worth role playing to your seller when we're talking about pricing this whole scenario at the listing presentation, so that when this happens, right? If they still pick aspirational, hey, we can do it, no problem. I understand that you're not in a hurry, but here's my concerns is we're only eventually, yeah, we will drop it and we will get an offer and we will sell this, or at least we'll get it under agreement, but now we've got no leverage. So now we're going to keep giving and giving and giving and giving. And so just explaining leverage to the seller so that if they do pick this aspirational, we've already had the conversation. I told you guys, right? We only have this. We have their agent. Unfortunately, they're not responsive. Well, what's going on? I don't know. I can't get a hold of the other agent. What's going on with the loan? I don't know. I can't get a hold of the lender. We had this conversation. I told you, ideally, we would like to be able to pick the agent, pick the lender when we're picking our offer, So, in every market, if it's luxury or it's higher end, which it sounds like this one was, like sometimes even in a seller's market, we're not going to have the luxury of 3 offers on the table. There are some properties that are just unique that we're just going to get the one buyer and we're going to be at the mercy of that one buyer. But setting the expectation for the seller right from the get-go just makes these conversations a lot easier. We know what we're getting into and we accept. Any other thoughts around this situation? It's just much easier to have these conversations up front with a seller to show that you're the expert, to show I'm not just trying to put this at a lower number so I can get a sale and get out of here quicker and make my money. This is really in your best interest, and here's why. At the end of the day, I'm just educating you. You still want to go with the aspirational pricing? I'm happy to do that. Just understand the cons that come along with doing that. We do have the lovely Kate Garvey on today. And Kate and I were chatting pre-call regarding seller's breach of contract. Right. So this is a situation where we've got ourselves a deal, and typically buyers are backing out of deals. But what happens when the seller just says, you know what? I'm not selling. Well, we got a signed contract. I'm not selling. Right. And so I was just asking Kate how many times this has happened to her. And she said on 3 different occasions this has come up. So Kate, I just kind of curious if you remember, and we're still holding escrow on 2 of those from a company.
Yes, you are.
A company that is no longer in existence. We still have to maintain those escrow accounts because we could not come up with a reasonable agreement for both parties on how we were going to disperse the buyer's deposit. So I'm just curious if you remember why. What are the things that could cause a seller to do this?
I would have to say, I mean, emotions could be number one, right? A lot of, houses are emotional things. You have a lot of emotional contact to them. I know one that I did definitely was just they weren't ready to do it. And this was literally 2 days before closing. So we got pretty far in this process, and then the seller backed out. And everyone was like, oh, I felt so bad for the buyers. And one time it was just a disagreement between buyer and seller. They just could not get along through this whole transaction, and the seller was kind of like, I'm good. And then I had my most recent one that actually the buyers are suing for specific performance. The seller literally just out of nowhere was like, I don't want to do this. And I explained to him all the, what could happen and blah, blah, blah. And he did not care. That's one that you're holding escrow for.
Yes, I just want you guys to understand, literally day before closing, seller can just go, I'm not selling. We got $5,000 sitting there in an escrow account. And the seller just goes, yeah, I'm not selling. So now it's on the buyer to try and sue for performance, hire an attorney. I mean, this could take months, years,
Yeah.
right?
It's a long process. It's usually a very long process, and usually it doesn't really end up in buyer's favor. A judge isn't going to force somebody without good reason, to get out of their house.
So you know what a buyer might end up with is obviously their deposit back, reimbursement for inspections, reimbursement for appraisal, maybe some sort of liquidated damages. I don't know. Hey, I've had to carry my mortgage for an extra amount. I've got some emotional stress. I don't know. Could you walk away with a couple of bucks? Yeah, but it's going to take you months, if not years, to get there, and it's a really shitty spot for a buyer.
Yeah, I think that in my experience when deals fall apart, the 3 that I had were literally a day or 2 before closing. The buyer just wants to be reimbursed, right? To your point, for inspections and appraisals and all that kind of stuff. And usually if that happens, you can negotiate something with the other side, but sometimes people just dig their heels in and they don't care.
Anybody have this happen to them and want to just kind of bring your scenario to the table? Let's kind of talk about it. What happened with your seller? Why'd they do it? How did we resolve it? Anybody have this happen?
Because what happens in the beginning of a deal, it's not that I'm not saying it's not frustrating or what have you, but people haven't, put a lot of time, effort, and money into it. But when it's at the end, it's definitely a different situation. And specific performance, like I said, that's not a quick process. It involves the court. Nothing's ever quick with courts.
Any other questions around the topic? Obviously similar with the buyers, where when they just back out for no reason, that's great. Sellers, we've got $5,000 in escrow. Buyer says, but there was this, or you weren't honest about that or the other, and I'm not signing the termination and the release. So that money still sits there, and a buyer can walk away, and the seller goes, what do you mean? They can just walk away the day before? Yep. Buyer can just walk away. In theory, that seller should get the $5,000, $10,000 deposit, but if the buyer doesn't sign that release, it just sits there, and they don't have to have any reason other than I'm not signing that release. And now it's on the seller to sue the buyer for performance. And we go around this same Ferris, or what's the word? I don't know. Hamster
Ferris
wheel?
wheel?
Hamster wheel? Hamster wheel? I don't know. Some sort of wheel. We are on the wheel.
Yeah, and a lot of times, sometimes it's just easy. Like, hey, let's split the baby, and you take 2,500, you take 2,500, and let's go. When it comes to like deposits and stuff like that and resolving, there are, you don't have to take all of the deposit. You can say, I'll take 1,000, you take 4. That kind of stuff can be negotiated, because you're going to spend more money ultimately than $5,000 litigating it. That's probably going to be your retainer.
Adam, I saw it on mute. What do you got?
I was going to say merry-go-round.
Is that what I was looking for? I don't know. Yeah, we're on the merry-go-round. Oh, boy. All right, we got 7 minutes left. Who else has got something unique going on a deal? What do we have? Somebody unmute that mic and talk to me about your... Come on. I know these real estate things go sideways.
I have a bad probate one.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Let's talk about that.
So I can't stress enough how I think it's so important that you guys understand using the Registry of Deeds website. And in Connecticut, it's a little bit different. Connecticut towns, you can search for some things online, but some things you might have to go to the town to actually look up. But it's so important. So I'm dealing with a closing where the information given to me by the agent was that, so-and-so owned the property and it was put into trust prior to her passing. Great. I get the deal. I'm going back and I'm like, only half of the property was deeded to the client and in the trust. So the other half of the property belongs to her brother, who also has passed away. So the issue here is mom and dad's, this is now going back to like the 70s, gave this house to the brother and sister and gave them a mortgage. Actually, it was 80s. Anyway, so now my issue not only lies with, I have to do a probate for half of this property, I may also have to do a probate for the parents because I need somebody to sign off on a discharge of the mortgage that they gave them. So, and the plot thickens with the brother lived in Maryland. Now, I practice in Connecticut and Massachusetts. I do not practice in Maryland. For any of you who may practice, anything in Maryland, it is almost impossible to get a death certificate. So the gentleman who passed away, his quote-unquote wife filed a small probate, but they weren't legally married. So now I have a probate in Maryland that I'm going to have to go to court in Maryland to get a death certificate and exemplified copies of the probate documents in order to do anything in Massachusetts, and everybody in the family has passed away. So this will be fun. So needless to say, that deal, the buyer does not want to move forward, but I'm still going to do the probate just to make sure they can sell it. But had, if I did not go back, it would come up in the title search, but it's so important to look at deeds and see who really owns it, because just because you pass away doesn't mean it automatically goes to the other person on the deed, or it automatically goes to a spouse who's not on the deed, or family members or whatever. So this is the title issue that I now need to get an attorney in Maryland. So if anybody knows an attorney in Maryland, let me know. But involved, and it's it's going to take a while.
I think the other thing to keep in mind here is really we want to try and get this stuff addressed pre-listing the property, right?
Yes.
Because we've now lost this buyer. We've lost the buzz of bringing the property to market. Now it's got a black eye, right? It's not reasonable to expect a buyer. I mean, Kate, your estimation on how long this might take?
I honestly think over a year,
Really?
because Maryland's not easy. It has not been easy to deal with at all. So I'm not thinking this is happening quickly. If it was Massachusetts or Connecticut, I'd feel more confident about giving a timeline. I don't feel confident about this at all.
Yeah.
And I might have to physically go to Maryland too. You know, this one's kind of a mess.
Yeah. So, it's not reasonable to think the buyer is just going to hang around for an undetermined
Right.
amount of time unless you're getting a really good deal. So yeah. And so now we've lost the buyer. We've lost the buzz of bringing it. With this amount of time, it's going to be like a new listing coming on if it's going to take, 9 months to a year or something. So,
Yeah.
but getting this stuff resolved up front, so that we don't lose the buyer. A black eye. Yes. Thank you, Stacy. All right. I think we will end it. Go ahead, Stacy. Did you have something? I see you unmuting.
No, I was just cracking up. Sorry, that is hilarious. I thought I heard everything, but that's a good one, a black eye.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yes. Meg, Kate referenced the registry of deeds. What should we as agents be looking for in the registry? Any kind of guidance there, Kate? Something that you think, hey, when you take a new listing, just go check X and Y, or?
Yep, I would start with the property address, because you can go back and see, everybody who's owned it, had a mortgage on it, and kind of say, all right, are there, obviously look at your most recent client, but you can also go back and see if there might be any pending issues. If there's mortgages, liens, anything like that. But I mean, just simple kind of, even to go back, 10 years, 20 years, depending on your client, obviously, and just make sure nothing was ever deeded. Because I think sometimes people think that they're doing the right thing and they don't really know what they're doing and things get messed up. So just kind of going through and looking for chain of title. I mean, that's what title searchers do, right? They just do a bigger, deeper dive, and they pull probate and they pull bankruptcy and they pull all that stuff. But just to go back 20, 25 years and just kind of make sure nothing's popping up. Like you can see a lien, you can see an execution, you can see if there's a lot of transfers back and forth of the deed, because sometimes people get divorced and then they add a kid and then they do this, and just kind of seeing the chain of title, I think, is important so that nothing's missed.
Meg, I'll give you my take, Meg. When I take a listing, I say, who do you guys plan on using as your attorney to sell this? And then I just send it over to the attorney. Let them do this.
Well, Steve, all I'm saying, I don't mind doing that, but all I'm saying is I think it's a benefit to all agents to understand the registry of deeds and understand how to search it. Because you can go back and you can say, I want to look for just deeds or deed related materials. I want to look for mortgages. You can break it down that way too, or you can do a more general search where everything pops up. I just think it's important. I mean, obviously that is part of my job, right? To make sure there are no title issues. But I think especially if you're listing, hey, let me just take a quick look at the registry of deeds.
Yeah.
It takes you 10 minutes.
Yeah, my quick look, Meg, has always been, let me just see if public record matches my clients. If I got an issue there, then maybe I've looked at the registry of deeds. For whatever reason, and I guess it's just because I'm not in there as often as Kate is, I look at that registry of deeds and it's like in another language to me. I can't get the right documents.
Well, you should familiarize yourself with it because it's important, especially in your world, everybody. That is just my advice of the day.
And when I read the damn deeds, like, again, that's not in English either. I can't even
No, it's a foreign language.
Oh my God, I don't know who the heck owns this thing. I read the deed and I'm like, I really don't know what just happened here. I don't know if my client owns it. I don't know if it got deeded to somebody else. I'm not really sure. So, you know what you should probably do at this point is you can just take those things and throw them into ChatGPT and be like, what actually happened here? And then you'd probably get a decent answer. So yeah. Anybody else have any thoughts on registry, deeds, anything like that? All right. Well, appreciate you guys. Go crush your Tuesdays. take some notes on whatever wacky stuff happens on your deals, and let's chat about it tomorrow morning. All right. Take care. Thanks, Kate.
Thank you. Have a great day, everybody.